Larry's accomplished so much under his leadership of what he was able to do and what his Marines were able to do in Helmand province really is a model of the future. And with that, Larry, the floor is yours. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
I'm going to start with the story here, and it has nothing to do with the slide. I think some of you know the history of the map. I was in Fallujah in November of 2008. I was over there with John Tryon, John Whistler, Juan Ayala, and some others, Razor or Wheeler Walsh, and we were over there. We were going to be the next rotation of 2F4 going in Iowa. We were there just before Thanksgiving, and at the time, Major General John Kelly Grant would say, "Larry, come here. I need to talk to you. I don't think you're coming. I don't think you're coming to Iraq. You probably need to get back to Camp June." So I got back to Camp June and went to see General Haley. I said, "Hey, sir, I'm hearing a lot of rumors. Is there any change orders?" And he says, "No, you're going to Iraq. There's been no change." On about December 20th, General Haley called me up, put his finger in my chest, and said, "Hey, Larry, start pulling them up. You guys start loading ships in about 4 weeks. And by the way, you need to be in country here pretty soon. You got a site survey." That started a cycle of events and a chain reaction of events very, very quickly. And I can tell you that 20 December, as you look around Camp June, it's not exactly the type of folks that you want to start building your met with. You know, at that time you're hanging around June. So, and an inauspicious start as we kicked off, but I think we got bracketed pretty quickly in terms of what we want to do. I think one of the things that was challenging for us is that none of the battalions that were coming could bring their gear. And we got machine guns from Indochina. And General Usher, it's fortunate he's here tonight because he ran a group called Sedgwick. And this group would meet at headquarters Marine Corps, and they would decide who was going to provide what gear for whom. There was only one battalion in country at the time that we were headed over. They wouldn't stand up. And they were under the command of this brave lieutenant colonel right here, Dave Odom. Dave Odom had 3rd 8th Marines. And as you know, our current history in Afghanistan started with 2-7. And 2-7 went over there about 2 years ago, and they went over there extensively to train police. The only problem was when they got into the Nausad, they got into the Golestan, they got into Bakhmut, there were no police. They became very quickly decisively engaged. And I think, as our commandant has said, we will never be fooled again. We will never deploy, not as a MACDAP. That has a lot of relevance as we look to the future today. Dave Odom and his guys came in and relieved 2-7, and we showed up towards the tail end of his deployment. But none of the battalions that were going, 1-5 from Pendleton, 2-8 from Camp Lejeune, 2nd LAR, none of those battalions and all of the squadrons and all of the CLPs, they were not going to bring their own gear. So we had to globally source gear, and it came from all 4 divisions, all 4 MLGs, all 4 wings. We ended up with 79 aircraft within the map, and augmented significantly by reserve Marines. And as you might imagine, at the time, General Haley was also trying to launch General Tryon and his team downrange into Anbar for what would be really the last rotation of Marines in Anbar. And so there was a competition of resources, competition of personnel, and a pretty tough way to get started moving over. Next slide. I don't need to insult this crowd here, but I think everyone understands there are many Afghanistans. The Afghanistan we went to in southern Afghanistan, principally in Helmand province, prior to our arrival, there were 6,000 Brits in Helmand. That was it, 6,000 Brits. We came in with 10,000 Marines. Next slide. And we knew that our mission was to go in the Helmand River Valley. I'm going to start with Marjah, and I'm going to finish with Marjah. I sat down, I had the opportunity to sit down with General Kiernan, who was kind of myself at the time on my site survey. Very generous with his time, sat needed me, and I asked him then, I said, "Sir, if Marjah is the worst place in Afghanistan, if it is the epicenter of the Taliban heartland, let us go there first. Because as you know, once we sink our combat power into areas in Afghanistan, we're not going to be able to pull them off." And I think everybody knows what I'm saying. Once you go into Nawa, Gormsir, Kenishin, once you go, you better stay. Where you stay, you hold. Where you hold, you build. And where you build, you better be prepared to start transitioning. What we couldn't do was go in and somewhere else and then pick up. What General McKiernan said is, "Hey, the elections are in August. I cannot afford to have this country breaking out in a highly kinetic environment in July It's not going to look good across the international TVs. The media will pick it up, and it's going to look like Karzai's losing control. So the answer, Larry, is no, we're not going to do Marjah until after the election. But that was a decision unto itself, one that would frankly cost us a little bit. On 2 July, with 49% of our gear at Camp Leatherneck, 49%. And John Simmons, my CLR commander, Duffy White, my RCT commander, and all of our battalion commanders, there was a lot of teeth sucking going on. We rolled the dice, and on 2 July, we inserted 4,500 Marines into the Helmand River Valley. We used Army aviation to put 1st Battalion 5th Marines in Now. We used Marine Corps aviation to put 2nd Battalion 8th Marines in Garmsir. And Tim Grattan and 2nd LAR drove 200 kilometers across the desert in what we would call our Hail Mary Act to go down to the Khanjar area, which you see, which is the southernmost portion of all of Afghanistan in Helmand province, and a short 100 and some kilometers from the border of Pakistan. Khanjar had not been under control of the Afghan government in more than a decade. So we were able to get down there and take that, and Tim Grattan and his guys were magnificent. We were able to do that without firing a shot. Because the Taliban knew that there were Marines coming, but I'm not sure they expected us to come in as quickly or as decisively as our battalions did. 4,500 Marines in 7 hours on 2 July. If you had to pick a week of the year to do an operation of this magnitude, 2 July would probably rank right around the worst. Our greatest concern was not the Taliban, although we were going in the Taliban heartland. Our greatest concern was heat. Our greatest concern was the ability to get to our Marines after they got off those helos. And very different than a lot of organizations, as we went in, the Commandant wanted Expeditionary, he got Expeditionary. As those Marines got off the back of those 53s and 47s that night, they had nothing but each other. There were no cops, there were no fobs, there was no resupply waiting on the objective. And they were, furthermore, I didn't allow them to follow up for a couple weeks. We wanted these Marines to go back to our light infantry roots. I didn't want the first thing that the Afghan people to see is Marines getting off helicopters and hiding behind escorts, putting up T-walls and stringing wire. We wanted them mobile. We wanted them moving around. And I think we all understood going in, the objective here is the people. We learned so much in Encore. And all of us are victims of our Encore experience. And we have a lot of great Encore vets in this room tonight. Helmand is not Encore. Afghanistan is not Iraq. But I'll tell you what, they are coin principles out there for a reason. Because they are transferable. Because they do make sense. In whatever coin environment you find yourself in. And while there are tremendous differences between Iraq and Afghanistan, there are some similarities that we'll talk about here quickly this evening. The bottom line is the sun came up on 2 July. We had inserted 4,500 Marines and 400 Afghan soldiers. That's it. 400 Afghan soldiers with 4,500 Marines. That's a 10-to-1 ratio. Not very positive. Sergeant Major Hubert and I, we talked to every unit as it came in, be it a squadron, a CLB, or the infantry battalion. But when we talk to infantry battalions, we talk to them a company at a time. I think when you're standing in front of 1,000 Marines at a battalion, you're really not connected. But when you're sitting there with 150, 200 Marines at a time, you can connect. You can call squad leaders up. You can get the company commander, first sergeant up there with you, and you can connect. And the first thing that Sergeant Major Hoop and I would tell these guys is, hey fellas, we cannot win this war. We cannot win this war. There's nothing we can do to win this war. And you would see the eyeballs, huge, these young guys staring at us. But we can help the Afghans win this war. And that's why we're here. We can help the Afghans win. Because at the end of the day, they got to win this war. You know, the bumper sticker that every day we should be doing less as they do more rings kind of hollow when it's a 10-to-1 ratio. And we got in a little trouble in the media. We were relatively vocal about the fact that a 10-to-1 ratio is not going to get us where we need to go. It was tough. The good news is in Marjah, when we did the Marjah and we crossed LD on 13 February, the ratio gone down about 2.5 to 1. So a tremendous uptick in the amount of Afghans that are available. All right, so it's now 2 July. The sun has come up. We did not go to Marjah. We went into Nowra, Garmsir, Khanjar. That would haunt me for 9 months. Because for 9 months, even though we had really a lot of very positive things going on in the Marine AO, and a lot of good reporting to document that, what I really got from the leadership of the Afghan leadership was, hey, you know, Marines are doing a great job in these towns, but you know, the enemy's in Marjah. What are you going to Marjah? That's where the enemy's at. That's where the center of gravity is at.
It was like a bad western. We would be in hot pursuit of the enemy. We would chase him into Marjah, and we had to stop at the city limits. We couldn't cross that boundary. And I think the one thing we have learned is where you go, you got to stay. We learned a hell of a lesson in Iraq. When Fallujah 1 started, we pulled out the 7th Marine Regiment and out from the west. We uncovered pretty much the towns of Rawa, Ana, Hit, Haditha, and some others, and we pulled a significant number of folks in there, into Fallujah. When we got back out west, and Craig Ducker and Lee Miller and the guys, they had a hard time earning back the trust of the people because we had left and because we had subjected them and really made them very vulnerable. We knew going in here, and the Marines have a term for it, they call it cutting the grass. You can go into any area here, it's an overmatch. You put a Marine company in any area here, and it's an overmatch. But if you can't stay, and if you don't have the legs to be there, okay, you're wasting your time because you're cutting the grass, and 2 weeks later the enemy will come back thicker and stronger. And only now you've given them an IO advantage, because now what they can come in and say is, hey, we drove the Marines out. Hey, the Marines don't care about you, your government doesn't care about you, they abandoned you, and we're here to take care of you. So you better be very careful. Whether you're General McChrystal or Captain Andy Terrell with Lima 3-4, you have tough decisions to make, and that is you can't be everywhere. You better pick and choose where you want to be and accept risk in the areas that you're in. But it would haunt us for 9 months that the leadership would say, yeah, good job, you know the enemy's in Marjah, why aren't you going there? We really got tired of hearing about Marjah. Marjah became the elephant in the room of every discussion we had. And in this Pashtun-Wali culture, which is very different than Envoy, but in this Pashtun-Wali culture, where strength is everything, everything is about strength. We hear a lot about reconciliation, reintegration. There's only one reason people come to the table. It's because they're in a position of weakness. They don't come to the table because they're in a position of strength. So I think that haunted us for a little while. Okay, now up north, where David and his guys were, is a little town called Nowzad. Nowzad, to me, represented everything, and I've been pretty vocal about this. We took Secretary Gates to Nowzad, not too many weeks ago, and walked in through the streets. Nowzad represented everything that's been wrong with this war for about 4 or 5 years. When 2-7 got up there, what they inherited was a position that was, for lack of a better term, it was Verdun. It was World War I. It was an enemy 3 kilometers away, dug in. Now think about it, as Marines, it is hard to put our head around this. There's an enemy 3 kilometers away from you, they're dug in, they're in trench lines, and you are sitting there every day looking at them as they look at you. As you patrol through a no man's land, this became the home of the double amputee. This was a horrible, nasty place. The population of Nowzad had left in 2006. There was no one left in the town. And I'm not talking about it was loosely populated. There was nobody, Dave, nobody in the town except for IDs. That's all that was there. Okay? And in fact, we, from a technological standpoint, I wish I brought the video, but we brought the ABV, the Assault Ranger Vehicle, only 15 of them in the Marine Corps. We took 5 of them. We got 5 of them deployed, and our test bed was Nowzad. It was like, for me, being a young lieutenant at 29 pounds again, breaching Soviet minefields. And we'll talk more about doing that as we get down to March. Long story short, 30,000 people had abandoned Nowzad in 2006, and for 4 years, we stared at them. NATO stared at them. A succession of rotations of Brits, Estonians, and other NATO countries, but nobody willing to take the decisive action until 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines, and 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines finished it. We used Ospreys. We put Ospreys in the middle of the night behind the enemy, and pretty quickly, with about 400 or 500 Marines, rolled up a pretty significant number of enemy in Nowzad. Long story, today, Nowzad, there are 5,000 people in the city. There are 50 families coming back a day. At the end of our tour, what we saw in Helmand, there are 6 districts now where the Afghan flag is flying where it never flew before. That's a hell of a lot of population that is now under control of the Afghan flag. You know, the one thing I would stress to our young leaders is that this is not the domain of brigade commanders and regimental commanders and battalion commanders. This is done every day by captains, by lieutenants, by first sergeants, by gunnery sergeants. This is a company commander's fight. This is a company fight. And each and every one of these lines of development here, each one of these is run every day by our young captains. And it's critical. One of the most important things we're working on today is our ability to be off the cop and fob. I told Marines, nothing good happens on a cop. Nothing good happens on a fob. Hunting and helping. Fox Company 2-2 is, We stole that from them. Sergeant Major Hubert and I stole it. But they had a logo called Hunt and Help. Every day we're outside the wire, we're outside the fog, we're hunting and help. There's still a significant number of Taliban that are out there needing to be killed and captured. We're very good at that. And every day we pursue that. But there's also a large population that's looking for help. And I'll tell you, we probably spent 90-95% of our time helping the population and moving the population. Look at the MEB mission. We wrote this in February at Camp Lejeune prior to deployment. That mission statement endured. It hasn't changed. 3 times in the first 4 sentences, ANSF. That's why it's very difficult when you start off on a 10-to-1 ratio. It's very difficult to be serious about transitioning to ANSF. One of the things we entered in the lexicon, I think, was the word transition. You can walk in any COC today in Afghanistan, whether it's an Army or Marine Corps, doesn't matter. It could be any NATO COC. You'll see British flags, American flags. You'll see Danish flags, Estonian flags, Georgian flags. What's the one flag you won't see anywhere? It's an Afghan flag. No Afghans own independent battle space. There is no Afghan independent battle space today in Afghanistan. One of the things that we started doing in 2006 in Iraq, under General Zilmer, is we started with a very modest Iraqi battle space up near Hubert. And we started with the 3rd Brigade of the 1st Division, which became the QRF Division, with a relatively modest and benign site that we started. And we gave it to them, and it expanded. And it continued to expand until it enveloped all of Al-Anbar. We need to do that. And frankly, we just haven't had enough Afghans to be able to do that. I know General Mills and his team, it's one of their priorities. They will, during their tour, establish independent Afghan battle space, and they'll start working. I want you to look at the end state, that first line. Tactically defeated on the battlefield and delegitimized in the eyes of the population. Back to the Pashtun-Wali thing. The tactical defeat of the Taliban in Marjah, that was good, but it was inevitable. And we got a lot of questions as, why'd you talk about it so much? Again, Pashtun-Wali culture, we're coming. You know we're coming, and there's nothing you can do about it. Plus, it was the only place left in the AO where there were any Taliban. So, frankly, it was kind of a no-brainer about where we were going to go. It's a little bit of a hollow order. But we were very vocal about it. In fact, we were a little bit puffy about it. And that we said, Joe Carter was talking about 15,000 Marines. We went on 2 towns. It was 1-6 and 3-6. 15,000 Marines going in the march. We had a battalion of strikers guarding in Nadia Ali, and did a great job for us. But again, part of our IO, part of our PSYOPs, and just kind of puffing up a little bit about how big we were going to be and how difficult it was going to be. We did go into march. We took a page out of the playbook from July. On 13 February, we put 1-6 and 3-6 by helicopter about 3 in the morning into the spine of Marjah. Marjah is not a town. It's a 400-kilometer area. It's a large area. So I always found it interesting when they talk about 15,000 Marines going into a town. This is a large, enormous area. As the sun came up, the Taliban had to deal with it. Taliban stronghold in Marjah was significant, but it wasn't. The tactical defeat was relatively straightforward. We knew that would happen. By day 3, we were in a pretty good fight. We had 32 ticks on day 3. Now, for you Anbar vets, and I would ask Mike Shuck, in fact, it was probably when Mike was leading 1st Marines in Fallujah, is the last time we had that kind of intensity. 32 ticks. That means 32 units that are in contact are requesting either surface fires or aviation fires to help them either defend or continue the attack. That's a lot. Most I've ever seen in a couple tours in Iraq and a tour in Afghanistan. By day 4, we had one of those crazy moments. On day 4, Cal Worth is the CO of 1-6. Sergeant Major Hubert and I are in Marjah, and there's a shura going on with gunfire in the background. There's about 40 Taliban sitting in a school circle, and Cal Worth, the lieutenant commander from 1-6, is standing in front of them, along with Haji Sahir, the forlorn governor of Marjah, the guy you might have read about, spent time in jail in Germany for beating his kids. And of course, the Afghans think that's just good parenting. They didn't understand why he was in jail in Germany for child abuse. That's true. But so there we are, and this guy stands up, and he says, "I'm a Taliban." And all of us sitting here, we are all Taliban. And he points at Cal Worth. And we had a Washington Post reporter there with us. And he points at Cal Worth and he goes, "I like you. I like Americans. I think you guys I trust you. I like you." Then he pointed at his new government. He goes, I don't like you. You represent a failed and corrupt government. But I'm going to work with you. I'll give you a chance. But if you disappoint me or if you don't keep your word, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to come after you. That was one of those seminal moments where you just kind of step back. I knew the fight in Marjah was over on day 8. There was a line of about 2 miles worth of tractors coming in, filled with women and children, overflowing women and children coming back. It was kind of like the Kosovo vets in here. You knew the fight in Kosovo was over when you started seeing people put glass back in the windows and no longer had plastic windows. So when they were going to make that investment and put glass in, you knew it. Long before the intelligence reports could tell you that was going to happen, it was happening. Long before anything told me that we had reached kind of tipping point in Marjah, we saw the civilians come back in, and we knew that was a pretty good. Which leads kind of the next issue is I'm a big believer that you really can't see tipping point until it's in your rearview mirror. But we got a couple towns in Helmand today. I would say now, large parts of Khanjar, Khanjar, and now Zan are in a point that are tipping. They're tipping very rapidly with very eager population. Marjah is different. It's the angriest group of people I've ever seen. But they're not angry at us necessarily. They are absolutely furious with the government. President Karzai came down on May 20. 800 people came out to see President Karzai, but they didn't come there to greet him and throw flowers. They came there to give business. And they really got after him pretty hard. Because he was the president when Marjah fell. What I don't think any of us really understood was that probably sometime 2007, 2008, Marjah, for all intents and purposes, seceded from the Union. They quit being Afghans. And if you ask them why, they'll tell you because it was so oppressive, it was so difficult, and the police were so corrupt. Non-judicial executions, extrajudicial executions in the middle of the street, police coming in houses, taking things, grabbing women, grabbing young men, and making them do things. The people said it was so untenable that they chose the Taliban because the Taliban were less. It was easier to work with the Taliban, and were less corrupt and less demanding and less taxing than their own government. So they quit. They essentially quit the government and joined the Taliban, inviting the Taliban in. And it didn't take long before Marjah became the poppy capital of Afghanistan, and certainly Marjah Helmand became the poppy capital of Afghanistan. Marjah was the golden egg in the middle of Helmand. But so there we are standing there, and this Taliban is yelling at his leadership. And it's one of the moments where you realize that we had some change coming. By day 8, I told you the tractors were coming in. We went from 32 ticks a day down to about 1 tick a day, down to probably General Mills and the guys now are probably having 1 or 2 ticks a week. So it really has come down a little bit. But what made Marjah a little different is that it was the only place I'd ever been in Afghanistan where people readily identified themselves as Taliban. You go to any other area and say, no Taliban here, Taliban are bad, thanks for getting rid of the Taliban. People there really identified themselves as Taliban. It had taken root. And we talked today a little bit in the city to some folks about the potential of almost a Sinn Féin, emergence of a political entity of people that are Talibans. Because so many Taliban Martians would tell me, hey, we want to participate in the government. We want to help. We want to, we're going to give you a shot. So I think we're going to see something unique. But Marjah, in many ways, has been isolated. It's kind of a petri dish for us now. We're trying some new things in Marjah. It's an experimentation in Marjah. The poppy harvest is over. Poppy harvest finished about 4 days ago. Poppy harvest is a big deal every year. It's where the insurgency, of course, draws all their money. And again, it is the fuel that feeds this insurgency. There was no poppy harvest in Marjah this year. 4,000 Marines, 2,000 Afghan security forces, pretty well had that area locked down. Much like Mike Shupp's Fallujah, after the fight, where there's ECPs and entrances to get into the city, Marjah, although a much more expansive area than Fallujah, it's tough to get in. Very, very difficult. Discussion points. Again, presence with the people. I think that's every Bing West, no stranger, anyone in this room, is writing a book. And that's what Bing does. But one of the things Bing is writing about was the presence of the Marines in Afghanistan. The amount of time the Marines are off the clock. You can't commute to work. You can't get up every morning and get into a battle room where you leave the wire at 0700. What we encourage, prescribe, to go out for 2 or 3 days at a time. Stay out. Be in and amongst the people. Total immersion in the population. Metrics and measurement in the foreign environment. We were up on the hill today, and we got a lot of questions about the metrics. How do you know if you're doing well? Is it the number of attacks, the number of IEDs, the number of casualties that you have? And I think they tell you some of the story, but they sure don't tell you much of the story. So I think a couple of metrics of measurement that we put stock into. Real indicators. Number one is the return of population. When you see the population moving back into areas that they've not been, hey, they're telling you something. That's number one. Number two, I can tell you the health of an area by the number of young men that are raising their hand to join the security forces. Down in Khanjar, we get 200 or 300 guys in the queue, pool leagues, that want to join the army, want to join the police. We can't absorb them all as quickly as that. But I think that gives you the relative health of a community. Because those young men are not making individual decisions. This is groupthink. The people there are not reading blogs, and they're not getting formulating their opinion from a lot of different sources. They are doing exactly what they're told by the leadership in their area. And if their leadership is telling them to join the army, join the police, that's a pretty good indicator. KLE, one of my favorite topics. Key leader engagement. Every day we do targeting. We do a lot of targeting. We're good at targeting. We're now also pretty good at non-lethal targeting. We're pretty good at non-kinetic targeting. We engage every day with local leaders. We did that in Afghanistan work. We did that in Iraq. Many of you have done that in previous assignments in Iraq and Afghanistan. We're very good at engaging with appointed or elected leaders. We've become better at engaging with tribal leaders. But I was the three for General Mattis in 2000, or General Matansky in 2005, when we had the purple figure moment. When in Anbar, and Mike, you were there, we had the purple figure moment. We had the big election. And the guidance we got out of Baghdad was only deal with the elected officials. Well, the fact that we had a single-digit electorate in Anbar didn't dissuade that ridiculous line of thinking. What we were told was, the tribal leadership in Anbar has been marginalized by 30 years of Saddam's rule. Don't pay any attention to this. They don't have any real authority. Man, is that bad advice? Terrible advice. We almost got some similar advice in Afghanistan. Hey, after the tribal leadership in Afghanistan has been marginalized by Soviet occupation and all these years of Taliban and turmoil. Don't pay a lot of attention. Terrible advice. We didn't take this time. Foolish once, but not twice. We went after them with a vengeance. And understanding the patchwork quilt, kind of the mosaic of tribal leadership and tribal or tribes in Afghanistan is more difficult because we don't have a sheet committee that says he claims 500,000 constituents. We have a little 6,000 man tribe here and a 10,000 man tribe here. It's much smaller, it's much more fragmented, much more difficult. In the human terrain map, we had a lot of folks working a human terrain map and understanding not just the topography, but the human cartography of the areas that we're going into. Okay, so now we're engaging with the local elected and appointed. We're really making headway with the tribes. Who are we not working with? There was a leg on that stool that we've just never worked with because it's uncomfortable, and it's the religious leadership. It's Islamic. It's just we're out of our comfort zone. So I think for years we ceded that to the Taliban. We didn't want to engage in it. What a mistake. We went after that pretty hard, and we brought over a Navy chaplain who was an Islamic cleric. He was an Islamic chaplain. Guy became a rock star. And we put him on the road every day. He was going to different communities. We call it the Mollapalooza Tours. What the Marines call it. Mollapalooza. Every day this guy was out flying around. And of course, as soon as he'd arrive in town, there was great skepticism. And we would, have advanced parties there, getting ready and trying to get all the local clerics in. He would arrive in a place like Nowzad or Delran. And of course, all the mullahs would show up and very skeptical of this guy wearing marked back utilities, clean shaven. He's obviously an imposter, he's a fraud. But then he would start reciting the Quran in Arabic. And they very quickly understood that he knew more about that book and he knew more about that religion than the entire collection of people that had come to see him. So he became very, very credible, very, very quickly. What we found out to our great surprise, honestly, was that as we reached out to the Islamic leadership, 90% of them reached back. We also found out that the madrasas that we hear so much about, 90% of the madrasas in RAO were not radicalized. They were, I get in trouble when I say this, but they were like parochial schools. I mean, they taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and the Quran.
I think early on people asked, hey, what do you guys need? So it went from baby wipes and beef jerky and Copenhagen, and very quickly shifted over to, hey, we need school supplies. We understand right now we need school supplies. So when you're talking about metrics of measurement, another one for us is schools. And I'm not talking about the mechanical building of school. That's completely wrong. It's the attendance at school. Every week, my staff and I would track school attendance. And if all of a sudden in Delron we had a dip, 50% drop off in attendance, man, that's a pretty good indicator something's not right. Something is not going the way you want it to. But when people, it's all about people voting. We're in competition every day with the Taliban. Every day we're competing with the Taliban. I don't like the term hearts and minds. I think it's a little naive. I like the term mutual respect and cooperation. But we are competing every day with the Taliban. And I think when people send their kid to school, they are voting with their own flesh and blood. And that's a lot. That means something. That's a vote. That's a vote in the government. That's a vote that you can take, you can hang your hat on. So I think that was another one. Intel. When you go into a new area, it's 99% SIGINT. Always 99% SIGINT. The Taliban are prolific talkers, and we're pretty listeners. But you kind of know when you start doing well, as you start to see the human step up a little bit. When you start getting more tips. There's a tips line today run by Brian Christmas and Cal Worth in Marjah. 200 calls a day to the tips lines when I left. We have radios in a box all over Afghanistan, run at the company and battalion level. We have DJs, Afghan DJs. In the morning they play religious music. In the afternoon they do talk shows and news. In the evening they play Bollywood music for the local for the kids. That's what they want. And but they have DJs. They get calls all the time. The amount of women that are on the phone talking to our DJs is very gratifying. This is a community really trying to break out, trying to get out from under. What I'm going to tell you now, and I hope I don't offend anybody here, but I'm going to say this. We don't think of ourselves as invaders or occupiers. I mean, we've never thought, we're Americans, we're Marines, we're soldiers. It's not how we ever see ourselves. But I got to tell you, when we went into Anbar in 2004, when we went into the Sunni heartland, I think sometimes that's how others looked at us. I mean, I really do. I think we went into the Sunni heartland and people were very angry. People were not happy to see us. And it took a long time to get out from that. It took a long time. You can search troops, you can search equipment, but you can't search trust, confidence, and personal relations. I mean, there's a lot of hand-holding, a lot of goat eating, and a lot of tea drinking to be done to accomplish that. In Afghanistan, no one looks at us as invaders or occupiers. It's a very, very different. The reason I tell you that is I think we started at a very different level. We started at a much higher level. People are much more receptive to seeing us. Even in Marjah, which was the epicenter of evil, supposedly. People were more happy to see us than they were, and maybe it was just me, but as I went around Fallujah, they were never real happy to see me either when I got home. So I think that we started at a better level. We started with a more receptive population. One of the advantages that we had going into the southern part of the country is we went into areas that no one had ever been in. We went into areas where many of them had never seen a Marine, or a soldier, or an American, or anybody from NATO. So there are advantages and disadvantages. One of the disadvantages is you don't know who someone is doing. But one of the great advantages is you're going to work with a population that's not fatigued or jaundiced by 8 rotations of broken promises, civilian casualties, escalation of force casualties. You're starting fresh. And they were genuinely happy to see us, although very nervous. Very pragmatic people. They're not going to jump on anybody's bandwagon and all that. The number one question we got for the first 6-7 months is, when are you leaving? Because they didn't think we would stay. When are you leaving? Because they're not going to hitch their horse to your wagon unless they know you're going to stay. Unless they know you're going to be there for a long time. And that's why July 11th, you think maybe they don't get the daily news, but they got that loud and clear. Everyone in Afghanistan understands that July 11th is a date, not necessarily we're all leaving, but it's a date that the rumors and the Taliban are using it to great effect to tell people that the Americans are in fact leaving. We try to spin that and say, you're right, we are leaving, we have no territorial aspirations, colonial ambitions, we got a lot to do. The clock is running. And so we push that pretty passionately. But I think we all know how this is going to end. Everyone here knows how this fight's going to end. It's going to end exactly like it ended in Anbar. And that's what we think. That's what we really genuinely believe.
Okay, the people in Anbar voted. There are no Marines in Anbar today. And I got to tell you, being a regimental commander there in 2006 and 2007, if you told me then that by 2009 there'd be no Marines there, I'd laugh at you. It would be incomprehensible. What we want to do in Afghanistan, I think, is we want to cut out the intervening years. We want to go right to 2008. We want to skip 05, 06, and parts of 07. Vice President Biden was in the country not too long ago, and his big question was, hey, how does this movie end? We know how it's going to end. We know how it's going to end, but we just want to cut out a lot of the pain. Again, I told you Marjah is a petri dish. Marjah also was wall-to-wall pop. What Colonel Randy Newman is doing here is something pretty significant. We're paying $300 a hectare in Marjah today because we didn't want to make an enemy of the farmer. The farmer is not necessarily the enemy. In fact, he's not the enemy. $300 a hectare for people to plow their fields and plant something else. Now, there's a dirty word in Afghanistan, it's called eradication. Ambassador Holbrooke will not let us get near eradication. We don't do eradication. Eradication is the purposeful destruction of poverty. We don't do eradication, but we will pay the Afghans a living wage to plant something new, to get out from under them. And what I think we found from the farmers is they don't want to plant poverty. They would much rather plant something they can eat, something that does not violate their Islamic code. And I think by and large, the mythology of Marjah was that it was a wealthier, that because of the drug trade, everybody in Marjah was living better and had more wealth than the average guy. What we found, very counter to that when we went into Marjah, is that it was the most impoverished, harsh travel area in all of Afghanistan. We'd never talked about the fact that I love the Iraqi army. A lot of you in here spend a lot of time with them. These guys are better, they're tougher, they're rugged, they're less needy. There's just not enough of them. And same with the police, there's just not enough of them. We had no idea when we were sitting at Camp Lejeune that when we got over there, we would have to run our own boot camp. But at Camp Lejeune, we were the first guys in the country to do it. A guy called Terry Walker, who many of you know in here very well. But Terry Walker, Burke Whitman, and some very talented Marines, active in reserve, stepped forward and out of every MSC, pulling guys off the flight line, pulling folks off out of the SMU, out of the administration center. We put together a team that really runs an 8-week boot camp for police. And if there's one thing I think you would all agree we do pretty well, it's entry-level training. Whether it's a Parasol, San Diego, or Quantico, we kind of got that down pretty good. We do that very, very well. And today, the 8-week curriculum that is prescribed by SISTICA, the training headquarters in Pool, we complete about 4.5, 5 weeks. That gives us 3 additional weeks to put the Eagle Global anchor right on their forehead, right on their heart. And when those police, with about a 50% attrition rate, when those police walk out and assume their duties as policemen, they're pretty good. When we got into Helmand, only 5% of the cops had ever been trained. 5% of the police had ever been trained. And as we say all the time, imagine in this country, if we just graduated kids out of high school, gave them a gun and a badge and said, go get them, Tiger, what a disaster that would be. Why would it be any less of a disaster in Afghanistan? Why do we do that? I don't know. You can always blame our predecessors. It's a lot more fun that way. But we're not doing that anymore. You know, they got your analysis that you can do in about an hour. In about an hour, you can tell whether the guy is clean. We need that over here. We have better tests over there. But we test everyone. And again, it's very important for us. We make them do a basic PFD. We have the yellow footprints. You know, that's what we do. We're not trying to make it rain. We're trying to make policemen, but we take a lot of great pride in it. You'll see cops running in the morning singing Jodies. No cops in the country go through what our cops go through. We're very proud of them. About 2 months ago, Lieutenant Joe Paul asked if we could start training in the Army. Could we run an Army boot camp? And of course, we don't know how to say no. Yeah, we'll do it. My supporting commanders were real happy when I asked for more guys to come up and form another school, which is going to be Army boot camp. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a feeder system right into the Afghan security forces that are going to be working with us. So I think there's nothing to do. Immersion of Afghans. The commandant came back and probably came to see us 4 times. What he got from an Afghan journal, something he talked about a lot. And when the Afghan journal said, hey, you know why I like Marines? The commandant said, why? It's because they drink out of the same canteen I do. They drink out of the same canteen our soldiers do. If you go to a Marine cop or fob today, you will see the Marines living with the Afghans. It's not separate. community. It's not separate on the other side of the party gate. It's in the same copper the same childhood. Now, they'll go out and do some of their own stuff, and we'll probably do some more ourselves. But it is total integration, complete and utter integration. And for us, that's the only way it's working for us. And I'll tell you, it raises them to a higher level. It really does. It raises the Afghans to a better level with that sort of immersion. Connecting the government. We can't connect them to Kabul, but what we can connect them to, what we have to connect them to is their local government. I'm going to talk about the brain drain for a second, because we're suffering tremendously in Afghanistan today from talented people who want to go in the government, from talented people who want to go in and work at line ministries or work anywhere in support of the government. Every governor should have a line director for education, for health, for agriculture. One of the great stories, I think, for the interagency for us is that in my headquarters today, in General Mills' headquarters today, that I had not only State Department reps like Cale Weston, who was with us the entire time, but we had many USAID reps. I had agriculture reps. Think about how useful that is in this counter poppy culture that we're working on there. The one thing the Taliban could do that we could never do is rule of law. They had like a traveling magistrate, Judge Roy Bean, if you will. The one thing that the people really like is the ability to administer justice quickly. Whether there's a dispute about a goat, water rights, or land, civil dispute, a Taliban magistrate would show up, he would listen to both sides, he would render a decision. The people like that. We have not been able to duplicate that. We have a very unwieldy, with the government that's in place today, it's just not as responsive, and that's something that we're working on. We're paying Terps ridiculous amounts of money. I had a cardiac surgeon working for me as an interpreter. London-trained cardiac surgeon working for me as an interpreter. He made 10 times more money working for me as an interpreter than he did working in the hospital in Canada. Now, that is indicative across the board. If you're a young Afghan today, you want to graduate from Kandahar U or whatever state you're going to, and you want to get a job with the British, with the Americans, with the Dutch, with NATO, with the UN, with multinational corporations that are over there. That's where you want to work, because that's where the money is. That's how you're going to become a wealthy Afghan. Working for the government. You know, the whole thing, you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. And I'll tell you, we're getting some third stringers. We are not getting the caliber of folks that we need. It is not helping. And we talked about this a little bit on the Hill today. We've got to find a way to be able to subsidize or make it more attractive to go into government service. Get some young, more ideological, young Afghans that want to serve their country. For the same reason they want to go in the army, but we're having a hard time doing that. All right, I'm going to close and just say again, the clock is running. The world is watching. It has been a very humbling and honoring experience, or an honored experience, and very humbling to lead 10,000 Marines in Afghanistan. We talk a lot about the greatest generation in World War II, and they certainly were, but I'll tell you, there's not a Marine in uniform today that doesn't know he's going to the war when he enlists. There's not a guy in uniform that doesn't know that when he signs up, either in the Army or in the Marine Corps, he knows he's going to war. And it is so inspiring every day to be around the caliber of young Marines and sailors that are representing us over there. And soldiers. I just Striker Battalion working for us for several months in preparation for the Marjah operation. Did a magnificent job there as well. But it's been a great honor to be here tonight to be able to talk to you, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.